Welcome back. Welcome back. Hollywood's latest sensation is the story of an outlaw biker with a life of drugs and alcohol who then goes to Africa after finding God, and he ends up taking on the notorious militia, the Lord's Resistance Army, in southern Sudan to rescue hundreds of child soldiers and set them up in an orphanage. It may sound a trifle far-fetched, unbelievable maybe, but it's all true, and it's based on a real-life character. His larger-than-life name is Sam Childers. The film is called Machine Gun Preacher. I spoke to him earlier, but first, let's see a clip.
The night commuters, they come from deep in the bush. Their parents send them out because it's safer to sleep here than in their own homes.
Why?
Because death comes at night in the villages. These are the lucky ones so far. The ones the rebels haven't found yet.
Sam, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you.
What was the crucial turning point in your life of going from drugs, addiction and dealing and whatever, and alcohol and that life,
right,
to the life of saving children in South Sudan? When were you converted? What happened?
It didn't kind of happen the way it shows it on the movie. It kind of took a couple of years, but I was in a really bad bar fight and shootout down in Florida. And on the way home that night, I almost got killed. And on the way home, I said, I'm done with this life. And I tell people all the time that has addictions, that has things that they need to conquer, it's up to you to make up your mind that you're done. And I made up my mind that I was done living that life because I knew someone was going to kill me, and I was going to die for no reason at all. I don't have a problem with dying, but I have a problem with what I'm going to die for. So I went home, I told my wife the next morning, I says, we're done, we're moving. We moved from Orlando, Florida, 2 weeks later, back to my hometown, Pennsylvania, and my wife started going to church with my mom. And 2 years later, I followed my wife and started going to church. That was the beginning of changing my life right there.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And how did you hit upon South Sudan as a place where you could make a difference?
I went on a normal mission trip for 5 weeks. I went in to do some work, to do some building and everything on some buildings. And while I was in there, I seen the body of a small child that stepped on a landmine. From the waist down on this body was gone, and I couldn't understand how could something like this happen and we allow it to happen. So I ended up, I went back to Sudan. 3 months later, I started supporting and helping the people pulling landmines out, but I knew there was more I could do, you know. So I just kept going back to Sudan every few months, and I started running a mobile clinic, and then the next thing you know, I'm riding through the bush, and God says, stop. And I pulled over, and he said, this is where I want the children's village.
Really? And yeah. you said somewhere, I noticed, you said this marvelous quote that I didn't save the children of Sudan.
Absolutely.
The children of Sudan saved me.
Yeah, it was the children of Sudan. You know, some people, try to make the movie out that it's another movie where the white man goes to Africa to save Africa. Not at all what happened. If anything, the children of Sudan saved me. And
you said once also that I found God, you said, in 1992.
Absolutely.
And then in 1998, I found Satan.
Absolutely.
Who was Satan?
Joseph Kony.
Ah, of the Lord's Resistance Army.
The leader of the Lord Resistant Army.
Who are one of the ugliest, most cruel groups in the world.
From cutting the lips and noses and ears off of children down to cutting the breast off of older women. The man has no agenda for what he's doing.
No agenda. He's not doing it for anything.
Right. Even one of the leaders of the UN said that what makes him the worst terrorist in the world is he has no agenda for what he's doing.
And how do you, when you find children in terrible straits and so on, and sometimes I guess they're in the hands of the Lord's Resistance Army or whatever, I mean, how do you rescue children from evil people?
Every rescue is different. I mean, every time you ever go out to rescue a child, it's different. Most of the rescues that we have went on are in a village that was raided by the Lord Resistant Army, and the children are actually hiding out. So we'll go into that area and do a recon and find these children in the bush hiding. Some of the rescues that we've been on, we've been ambushed along the road. The Lord Resistant Army, they're coward fighters. This man, Joseph Kony, is a coward. So what they do is they'll ambush the vehicles as they're coming down the road. But if you resist them and you get out and start to fight, they usually run.
And what about as you work in the South Sudan and so on? I mean, obviously you clash with the Lord's Resistance Army and they're very tough organizations. And do you have to have soldiers protecting you from them?
Absolutely.
You do?
Yeah, absolutely. I have soldiers that are with me all the time. But what you got to remember, the movie is pre-2008. So things aren't like they were before 2008. Like around our orphanage, there hasn't been anyone killed in the past 2 years by the Lord Resistant Army. In northern Uganda, there hasn't been anyone killed in 3 years. But on the Congo side, there's still a problem. You know, since the first of the year, there's been over 1,000 people abducted. There's been over 200 people killed. So that's still a problem.
And how many children do you care for in South Sudan?
We have, not just in Sudan. I work other projects.
Yeah.
We have 3 projects in Ethiopia. We have 3 projects inside of Uganda and the orphanage in Sudan. We feed about 3,500 meals a day. We have well over 200 children that we take care of 24/7.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a great joy to have you with us.
Thank you, and God bless you.
May your work go from strength to strength.
Thank you.
After more than 60 years of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, an ongoing occupation and a crippling blockade on Gaza, the Palestinian refugee crisis remains as unresolved as the conflict itself. As the Palestinians push ahead with their bid for recognition at the UN, some would say doomed bid, but anyway, the US threatens to cut off further foreign aid. How will this affect the 4.7 million refugees still living in camps? With sweeping changes taking shape in the region, the youth demanding basic freedoms and basic rights, the situation for the Palestinians has stagnated, despite their various international efforts. Joining me here in London to discuss why the Palestinian refugee question is key still to any final agreement between the two sides, as well as how the Palestinians have reacted to the Arab Spring, is the Commissioner General of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, Filippo Grandi, and the way you pronounce the organisation?
UNRWA.
UNRWA, the little roll on the R.
That's
there, yes.
right.
And were you astonished by the fact that apparently switching to a sort of anti-Palestinian policy that the United States cut off aid, reduced aid by $200 million here and by more to UNESCO? Was that a shock to you?
Well, the politics are difficult around this question.
Yes.
And certainly I hope that in the weeks and months to come, these decisions may be revisited. It is extremely important to continue to support not only UNRWA, the agency I work for, and therefore the refugees, but also the other half of the Palestinians, the non-refugees that are under the authority of the Palestinian Authority. The immense investments that have been made over the years in state building should not be wasted. And I do hope that political considerations apart, this will be kept in mind when decisions are made.
So you're really hoping for that policy to be changed, and difficult though it is, it's important, it's vital, you're saying, really, that policy be changed.
I think it's vital. Everything is difficult, as you know, in the
Yes.
Middle East, and everything around the peace process is difficult. The peace process itself seems to be coming to a very difficult point, and nobody more than the refugees, than these 4.7, almost 5 million, understand and feel this and are frustrated by this, especially at a time when everything else in the region is so dynamic. So it's important to push on in spite of the odds, but it requires a lot of courage and political determination.
And has the Arab Spring had any benefits for the Palestinian people or the Palestinian refugees? Or is it really had no effect on them?
I think that it has had, like everywhere in the Arab world, a powerful effect, because it has opened up a space for them to express their feelings even more. But it has also put them in front of the very stark realization of the contrast between this huge dynamism and huge opportunities around them in the whole region, Egypt, Tunisia, and so forth, and the realization that their space is constrained by the lack of progress in the peace process.
And what about the situation, the sort of elements of reconciliation between Hamas and Fatah? I mean, is that relationship, budding relationship or whatever it is that helpful to the Palestinians, or does it neither help nor damage them, or does it damage them?
You may remember that when the Arab Spring began a few months ago, one of the first things that the Palestinians went to the streets and asked for across their political divide was unity in their leadership. And I think that I hope that the Palestinian leadership, and I trust that the Palestinian leadership will listen to that call from the whole population. They want unity, they want this divide to end, and they want also to be represented, all of them, those inside Palestine and the refugees in and outside of Palestine. Everybody wants to be represented. You know, one of the things that we have been saying is that, one, there cannot be peace in the Middle East if the refugee question is not solved. And two, in order to get that peace and to get to a solid, durable peace, everybody, including the refugees, have to have ownership of what is achieved in the end. That's why the Arab Spring offers that space. People feel that that space now needs to be occupied. We have to make sure that it is.
If the situation at the moment is where there's greater hope and greater optimism because of the Arab Spring, that if that was frustrated in some way, that then there could be a third intifada, or is that much more unlikely now?
Well, we have to hope that all the bad things from which the Palestinians are suffering, and it's not just the lack in the peace process, it's also the continuing occupation in Gaza and the West Bank. It's also the lack of rights of Palestinians in Lebanon and other situations. I hope that all these situations are addressed before the frustration grows to a point where violence may seem, regrettably, the only way forward. We think that violence is bad. We have condemned many times the firing of rockets from Gaza and other manifestations of violence, but it is important to address many of these frustrations before they become so serious that it will be difficult at that point to stop the anger to come out. That's the risk.
And absolutely clear that and in terms of living in Jerusalem, you're living in Jerusalem, you've been there for 6 years or whatever. In this area, have you seen dramatic changes in life in Jerusalem, in rights in Jerusalem, in optimism, pessimism in Jerusalem?
I have to tell you, Sir David, that living in Jerusalem for 6 years as I have has not always been a pleasant experience. Unfortunately, in Jerusalem, in East Jerusalem, and in the West Bank, and especially the area around East Jerusalem, the constant advance of the Israeli settlements has caused untold suffering to the Palestinians, because that is usually seen as a political issue, a little bit in the abstract, but in reality it has enormous immediate impact on the lives of thousands of people, many of whom are Palestinian refugees under our mandate. You know, house demolitions which are escalating, and land taken away, the separation barrier, the lack of access to services. This is very practical, very real, very concrete for thousands of people. When we talk about frustrations reaching boiling point, these are the things that make that boiling point unfortunately closer, and we need absolutely international advocacy for this to end. And another important thing, people get displaced. You know, many of them are refugees who are already, had to move from wherever they lived before. And now, because of demolitions and because of other constraints, they have to be displaced again. They relive their experience of exile, and it is even doubly painful for them. So it's a really sad situation, and in Jerusalem we see this every day very concretely.
Filippo, thank you very much indeed for being with us. You're a tremendously powerful, persuasive speaker on this subject, and we're delighted to have you with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Filippo Grandi there, an inspiring figure. The 2012 race for the White House. It hasn't even officially started yet, but is it over already? For the Democratic Party, the choice of candidate is easy, President Obama. For the Republicans, though, the choice is not so clear-cut, and the options seem to be running out quite fast. Mitt Romney, though, is the favourite, but he's not the choice of many in the party who've been searching for an alternative. First off the blocks was Tea Party darling Michelle Bachmann, but her star has faded after some lacklustre performances on the stump. Next up was Texas Governor Rick Perry, but he rather spoiled his chances last week with this forgetful performance in a TV debate.
It's 3 agencies of government when I get there that are gone. Commerce, education, and the, what's the third one there? Let's see.
You need 5.
Oh, 5, okay. So commerce, education, and the
EPA?
EPA, there you go. No, okay.
Let's talk deposition.
Seriously? Is EPA the one you were talking about? Or?
No, sir. No, sir. We were talking about the agencies of government. EPA needs to be rebuilt. There's no doubt about that.
But you can't name the third one?
The third agency of government,
Yeah.
I would do away with the education, the commerce, and let's see. I can't. The third one I can't. Sorry. Oops.
Not a great speech, but very good television. So many Republicans turned instead to Herman Cain, the fast food magnate. But again, his undoing was a very public one, as he stumbled over a question on Libya.
So you agreed with President Obama on Libya or not?
Okay, Libya. President Obama supported the uprising, correct? President Obama called for the removal of Gaddafi. Just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing before I say, yes, I agreed, I know I didn't agree. I do not agree with the way he handled it for the following reason. No, that's a different one.
So where does this leave the Republican Party's hopes for next year? I'm joined now by our regular Republican commentator, Charlie Wolf. Welcome back, Charlie. And our author and playwright, Bonnie Greer. Bonnie, welcome.
Thank you, David. Good to be here.
Great to have you. Let's start with that question of the Republicans. I mean, have the ones we've mentioned, have they wiped themselves out, do you think, by these gaffes? Or do these gaffes wear off quite quickly?
Well, I think, you know, there's an issue here that we need to touch on first, and that is the state of the Republican Party, which I'm not a Republican, but for my mind is getting close to a tragedy in a sense. The fact is the Republican Party is become the political wing of Fox News. That is the problem. So that what begins to happen is that you get entities, you get people like Rick Perry, you get people like Herman Cain, fine Americans, fine human beings, but they're not presidential timber. They play well on television, they look good, they play to the crowd, but they're not presidential timber. So when it comes down to the crunch, Herman Cain at that point was ahead in the polls. Rick Perry at that point was ahead in the polls. When the real deal begins to happen, that's when it starts to fall away, and the Republican Party is now at the point where it has to contend with this entertainment entity that masquerades as a news organization, and real serious people like Charlie who want to see a Republican president, but how do you balance it between these two? We don't talk about that enough. It's media has intruded in this process now. Yeah. One of the reasons that Barack Obama was elected, the media has come in, but the Republican Party is in trouble about it now because there are not that many Republicans in America registered at the moment. They've got to find a candidate who is going to be able to do one of two things: hold that media attention, and at the same time be a credible and winnable alternative to this president.
Right. And I think at that point, come to you, Charlie. What about these candidates we've been talking about here now, with the media effect and so on them? I mean, who do you think's the front runner today at this moment in time, and it could change by tomorrow?
Well, I think the one, put it in marketing terms, I think Mitt Romney is the Coca-Cola to everybody else's Pepsi. Everybody is comparing to Romney. It's all the second-tier people trying to go up to battle Romney. And Romney seems to be the most presidential of the lot. I mean, they're all very good men and women, talking about Michelle Bachmann.
You nearly did a Rick Perry.
Yes, I almost did a Rick Perry.
Almost did.
Well, it shows, remember, the dynamic will also change. These guys have gone through, I don't know how many debates so far, an amazing amount. And I'm not trying to cover over their flaws, but in the sense of even Herman Cain, the guy was on about 4 hours sleep. Rick Perry, anyone can have a brain freeze. Now, I don't think Rick Perry is qualified because he can't debate. That one slip-up was one of many. I don't think Rick Perry would be able to get into the crucible with Barack Obama, who's a superb, at least performer. I don't know if I call him a great debater, but he's a great performer. Herman Cain, yes, I think that performance showed that he's not as up on foreign affairs as he needs to be. But remember, the dynamic will change when it gets to the different races, and it becomes down to a battle of TV advertising.
You don't think that someone like Newt Gingrich can come back into the fold?
Well, the interesting thing about Newt is he is an intellectual heavyweight. And it's funny, I was reading an article this morning saying a lot of people would love to see him if for no other reason than to watch the debates between him and Mr. Obama. It'd almost be like the Lincoln-Douglas debates. But he does have a lot of baggage. We were joking a minute ago, it wasn't baggage, it was luggage.
Steamer trunks.
Steamer trunks. And these things are important. I look at it, I mean, also another thing, another dynamic that'll change is President Obama is a ruthless and shameless campaigner. And I say that almost with a tinge of admiration. But I don't know if that's going to work this time around. He won't have the fake seal as he had the last time. He's going to actually have the real seal, and he'll have the bully pulpit of being the President of the United States. But I think some of the optics that his team were able to get away with are not going to work to the same level. People will see through it, and they may be a bit tired of it.
Well, Bill Kristol, who is one of the big Republican, I guess, grassroots Republicans who call an elite and in disdain, has said basically that 2012 is over. Republicans should go for 2016 because the Republican Party doesn't actually want Mitt Romney as their front runner. They actually don't. They would like to have actually Chris Christie, who would have been the anti-Obama, which is what you have to look for, but he's not running.
A lot of people, sorry to interrupt, a lot of people have held out because, yeah, they're not sure. As bad as the numbers are for Obama, there's still a chance he could win.
Yeah, because well, his base hasn't eroded, but Mitt Romney has to win over that base. He is considered by grassroots Republican as a country club Republican, and they don't really want that. Their favorites fell away. Representative Bachmann, former Governor Palin didn't run. Governor Perry isn't looking too good. Mr. Cain is probably out. So now you're stuck with Newt. And I say stuck in the sense that for the Republican elites, people like Charlie, who will hold up the whole tradition of the grand old party, the GOP, Newt's a big problem. He has, as Charles Krauthammer said, violated some orthodoxies within the Republican Party, the global warming, all of these things.
Let's follow this progress in a couple of months' time and so on. Those are the early feelings, and the early feelings about the chances of the Republicans, if any, etc. Or will there be a way in which they can strike back at Obama and so on? Well, that's all for this week. We'll be back with you then, and that's in 4 weeks. And we'll be back with you folks, hopefully, in 7 days' time for another Frost Over the World.